And it's so powerful, in fact, that I believe it was interfering with your microphone earlier. That all the little arcs that were behind
That's right.
you.
The ark's behind me over here.
Yeah,
they're all.
Well, so I was going to actually ask Kevin. So you acquired a replica ark in the book. You go to a shop in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And what's in your ark now?
Yeah, it's
If
hilarious.
it's drugs, we'll cut this out. Don't worry.
I open it up and our faces all melt. That's the end of the New Brunswick Archaeology Podcast.
The New Brunswick Archaeology Podcast, featuring your hosts, Gabe Reineck and Ken Holyoke.
Welcome back to the New Brunswick Archaeology Podcast. I'm Gabe Reineck in Fredericton, New Brunswick, and I'm joined, as I am just about every fortnight, by Ken Holyoke in Lethbridge, Alberta. How are you, Ken?
I'm doing very well, Gabe. It is, we're bracing actually for, quote, damaging winds this afternoon.
Whoa.
120 kilometers an hour, apparently, is what we may get wind gusts to.
So you did not bike to work today, I gather.
I did not. And I assume that we'll be sort of like wrangling children in the wind at the end of the day.
Yes, a real anti-M type situation. So Ken, I've got a question for you. Why does Lethbridge exist?
Why?
We typically, like who thought, oh, I know what we like.
So it was an area where the Blackfoot were living. There was also a whiskey trading fort, a fort that was established to intervene in the whiskey trade in the late 19th century called Fort Whoop-Up. And it got its name because apparently it was quite wild. For a while, it served as an intermediary on the whiskey trade. And then it became...
And that's what they call the faculty club at Lethbridge.
Yeah. We actually don't have one here at the university.
Yeah. We don't have one either.
And so it became a Northwest Mounted Police outpost. So as a city, it was built up around these sort of early kind of fur trade and policing forts of the 19th century. Yeah.
So it was not well planned, is what you're telling me.
So I've talked about this with Kevin and Sean, and I'm curious because the wind is pervasive across the entire reaches of southern Alberta, and places like Wally's Beach, which we've talked about on the show before. This very early Pleistocene era site is on this huge open plain area, and I'm curious because you have bison jumps as well, so you get head smashed and buffalo jump, and all of these large archaeological sites are in locations where indigenous people would have been just absolutely brutally bashed by the wind on completely open landscapes.
Yeah.
So
and
when the wind began, actually, like was it a weather pattern that always existed just because of the it's the
if a buffalo hits that jump right, it could sail.
On a day like today, I mean, at the very least, it'd be great because if you're upwind, you're not going to smell all the rotting bison carcasses. That's yeah, but
interesting.
So I'm really curious about it because it's the reason it's so windy is because of the Crow's Nest Pass, right? So all of this wind, rather than traveling up over the Rockies, finds its slipstream through the Rockies Pass. So,
and that's interesting. And you made it back to Lethbridge, okay?
Yeah. It was a little. The landing was a little bit dicey because it was windy on Sunday as well, but. But all good. I got to eat at the Chili's in the Calgary airport, and I didn't record a podcast hit, but it was back to those bold Tex-Mex flavors really welcome a man home.
And when you were there, Ken, did anyone lean over to you and say, "Oh, congratulations on the new paper"?
No, they didn't. In part because it wasn't out then.
Right.
In fact, the lead author of the paper, Lindsay Amundsen-Meyer, received a sort of ambiguous email from the editor that the editor wasn't sure where it was in the process with Cambridge Press, but as of this morning, on the, what is it called with AAP?
First View, I think.
Yeah, so in the First View, ladies and gentlemen, you can find, actually here, if you stall for a second, I'll pull up the actual article.
Well, I've got it right here. It's Contemporary Cultural Resource Management in Canada, Labor Market Dynamics and Challenges. And I understand this has been aging like a fine wine with the folks over at Cambridge.
Yeah, so the paper has been through editorial and peer review and fully accepted and ready to go since about July. And since then, there have been some challenges tracking whereabouts the paper was in the production process with Cambridge, the Cambridge Press.
And your grandfather got a BA at Cambridge, and this paper spent more time at Cambridge than your grandfather. Is that essentially the... And well, congratulations, Ken. This looks exciting. I haven't read it yet, but I'm going to read it this afternoon.
That's great. Yeah, and we'll put it in the show notes, folks, and we'll probably talk to Lindsay and Matt early in the new year to talk about the paper and what the project is. We're continuing this. It's sort of kind of kicking off what we hope to be sort of a longitudinal study of the Canadian CRM industry. But you can find the article now. It is online and it is open access. So for those of you who do not have an institutional subscription, you'll just have a link that will take you right to that article.
That's right. And Ken, while much of what we talk about on this show is canonical, very little of what we've talked about on this show has been biblical. And but we've got a very special episode just in time for Christmas. We're talking to Kevin McGeough today about readers of the Lost Ark. But I think the fact that this is really spanning now to biblical archaeology highlights that our name might be somewhat limiting, don't you think?
That's right. It's not just the New Brunswick Archaeology podcast. We are going overseas.
Spelled A-R-K.
A-R-K, yes. And you may have hinted at the name of the episode. Yes, it is the New Brunswick Archaeology podcast today.
Mm-hmm. And we actually view our relationship with our listener as sort of being carved in stone, really carved in stone and brought down and put in a special box. And that agreement includes that we would just never want to break our covenant with our listener and take their IP if they suggested a new name for this podcast.
That's right. That covenant is so strong it could part seas, Gabe, but we certainly will not steal it.
Yes, no. And so Ken, if the listener were to have a new name for this podcast, where would they send it in?
They would send that to newbrunswickarchaeology@gmail.com. That is New Brunswick Archaeology, all one word, archaeology spelled ARCHAEOLOGY, newbrunswickarchaeology@gmail.com.
That's right. And Ken, where would they send in the? Oh, sorry.
It is the end of a very long fall.
I was riffing there. I had in my mind, I was trying to make a joke about like a kind of prosperity gospel type thing. You send in the money, and I couldn't grasp it in time.
Klondike 5.
Exactly. But what would they win?
Well, so this holiday season, the New Brunswick Archaeology Podcast is bringing you a prize that will last the whole year round. Yes, we have partnered with our friends at Chasqui Deliveries to bring not just 12 days, but 12 months of enjoyment delivered right to your doorstep. That's right. This fortnight, if you can rename the New Brunswick Archaeology Podcast, there is a dozen delights headed your way with their own unique theme. And there's sort of a broadly encompassing theme as well. Now, we don't want to spoil the excitement, but we think the anticipation for what you might be able to get is simply too much. And so without further ado, our prize read for the lucky listener that renames the New Brunswick Archaeology Podcast begins we're going to start at 12 here, Gabe. And so
we're counting down?
We're counting down. Yeah.
Okay,
so months 12 through 6, we're getting you set for the field season. And to begin, whether you're laying in units or just looking to impress your surveyor friends, we're giving you the rarest and most expensive way to set up those units with a dozen Site Pro steel arrows. These are chaining pins with the chaining pin carrier included. And then the next month, you're going to be flooded with literature. And so we're going to be sending you 11 books that you haven't read yet, but you swear that you're going to, and when they land on your doorstep. This might be the copy that the book review editor sent your way and you committed to reviewing, or it might be the course textbook that sat collecting dust on your shelf. It might simply be the book that you read the first chapter of and cited in your thesis as if you read the entire thing. In your 10th, 9th, and 8th months, you are going to receive a series of Sun2, MC2 NH mirror compasses so that you don't get lost in the field and so that your students also feel like that they wouldn't get lost. Or if and when the GPS eventually fails. Next, you can't have great photos, sharp corners, and impress your friends without a Lufkin wood rule. We're not getting you the cheap Amazon knockoffs. This is the real deal. And what good is a field program without a fresh package of fine-tipped Sharpies? These are the standard in permanent marker, and don't be fooled by imitations or think that if you have less than 8, you'll end the field season with even one of these bad boys. Now, you're going to have lots of notes to manage. So in month 7, we're setting you up with 7 cruiser-made form holders. These feature 2 storage compartments that hold 1 inch, and that's 2.5 decimeters of depth, featuring recycled aluminum and antimicrobial coating so that you can both freeze your fingers to it and avoid transferring that tooly thumb bacteria to your colleagues. It's not a field season without notebooks that your students don't fill out. And so in month 6, we're going to be sending you 6 ring notebooks from six-ring notebooks from Duxback, caringly manufactured and designed in British Columbia by RD Penhall Limited. Now, we're offering this too with the opportunity to customize your...
It's Courvoisier proof too. That's the great thing about Duxback, yes.
Exclusive to the New Brunswick Archaeology Podcast. And finally, in month 5, you're not ready for the field season if you don't have a trowel. So while we need to do a little cross-border negotiation, we are indeed still supporting the paramount best trowels in the game from Marshalltown. These pointing trowels are forged from a single piece of high-carbon steel. They are durable enough to cut through compacted sediment and compressed soils. Indeed, Marshalltown offers 2 blade patterns for your archaeology trowel. That's the standard pointing or the London pointing. And you can choose your preferred blade size and pick between a standard or a heavy-duty blade. And just because it's the holiday season, we are going to custom order these babies gilded for you. So like Kent Flannery, you can imagine a golden Marshalltown as a symbolic award for dedication to basic research, ethical practice, and genuine engagement with archaeological culture in the human past.
Plus, it's great if you need to do any CRM at Mar-a-Lago.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, it wouldn't be a field project without some help. So in month 4, as you're leading into this field season, on the graces of their unions and your sustainable long-term funding through support from our institutions, we're happy to provide the first ever New Brunswick Archaeology Podcast graduate student TA-ships, 4 in total, to see your research thrive and their projects advance in ways that you can only imagine. Skipping ahead to month 3. Now, 3 is a crowd, right? But it is also the bare minimum number of 2x4s that you need to erect a standing screen on your next excavation. So we have linked up with our good friends at Forestry Suppliers to provide you with their HME tripod game hoist. That's right, this baby can set up in 15 minutes depending on how late you were up the previous evening, fits in the back of your truck, but also saves your back with its adjustable hoist, meeting both comfort and OSHA requirements for your team. Held up by galvanized chains, this hoist can support 300 pounds of capacity, so shovel away, my friends, and fill that screen to your heart's desire. A handy-dandy attached plate leaves a place to leave your field notes, and a game gambrel.
Wow.
And a game gambrel, in case while you're on the job, you need to field dress that deer that you hit on the way into sight. And finally, on the first month of this 12-month extravaganza, you are going to receive 1 Ark of the Covenant. Now, this is not just any Ark of the Covenant. This beauty is built with sustainably sourced acacia wood.
How many animals does it hold, Ken? Will it hold enough animals?
It doesn't hold enough any animals, but which, according to Impactful Ninja, acacia wood is sustainable because acacia trees capture carbon from the atmosphere, while acacia furniture works as a long-lasting carbon storage. As a fast-growing and adaptive species, acacia trees enable a sustainable supply of acacia timber. Now, we're true to our word, and we're true to his word. So this Ark of the Covenant is going to be 2.5 cubits in length, 1.5 cubits breadth, and 1.5 cubits height. It will be gilded entirely with gold, mined right here in Canada, and a crown or molding of gold that will be placed all around it. 4 rings of gold, again, all sourced right here in the homeland, are to be attached to its 4 corners, 2 on each side. And through these rings, staves of shittim wood, and that was not us getting an E rating, but referring to the Vichelia Sael, or the red acacia. And finally, this beauty is going to be overlaid with gold. And so if you and your friends decide it's time to party, split the sea, or simply melt the face of your Nazi enemies, we've got you covered. And so it wouldn't be the holidays without a little bit of festive cheer here, Gabe. So I'm going to close off this prize read by letting you know that in the 12 months of giving, we've got 12 pins of chaining, 11 books you haven't read, 10 compasses without buttons, without bubbles, 9 metric snapouts, 8 fine-tip Sharpies, 7 boards for clipping, 6 ducksback notebooks, 5 golden trowels, 4 grad student TA ships, 3 legs of tripod, 2 reviewer 2s, and an Ark of the Covenant Sea.
Wow, Ken.
That's all for you if you can rename the New Brunswick Archaeology Podcast.
Well, no one is going to want to miss that prize this holiday season, Ken. And where would the lucky listeners send in the new name for this podcast?
They would be sending that to newbrunswickarchaeology@gmail.com. That is New Brunswick Archaeology, all one word, archaeology spelled ARCHAEOLOGY, newbrunswickarchaeology@gmail.com.
That's right. And that's where we've got a list, and we are checking it twice. But speaking of checking it twice, Ken, if you were to check our mailbox at that very same address, what's in the mailbox?
What do we have in here? Oh, it looks like we actually do have a couple of notes. The Pod Match team would love to connect. LinkedIn Marketing is telling us to keep it up. Lynn emailed, ECMA announces 2026 hosts for Sydney. Hi, Gabriel. This is for you. I'm reaching out with a quick East Coast art story that may be a strong fit for New Brunswick Archaeology Podcast. ECMA has just announced that Bette McDonald and Maynard Morrison will host the 2026 East Coast Music Awards, presented by Rogers and Sydney Cape Breton. Their long history in comedy, theater, and East Coast storytelling, combined with ECMA's return to Cape Breton, gives
so, Ken, are they looking for a pedal steel guitar player? They're looking for a pedal steel player, aren't they?
Regional interest. If you'd like the full press release, photos, or to set up interviews, I'm happy to send everything your way. Well, Lynn, who appears to be the marketing person for the ECMAs, it's really fascinating. I mean, we haven't done any promo for the East Coast Music Awards before, but I guess we kind of just did. So,
I mean, we would host the Junos if somebody wanted us to.
Yeah. So, I guess we can get back to them. But
sure.
Yeah.
The
should I read the press release? It's included in the email.
Let's reach back to them, and we can judge their sincerity after that. How's that sound?
Yeah, this looks pretty official, actually. Like she's got there's an email that is at marketing@ecma.com. So
well, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Huh.
We'll thanks for thinking of us, Lynn.
Yeah.
And we'll be in touch.
We'll be in touch. She must have seen the stats, Gabe. That
our stats are. Speaking of the stats, Ken, I mean, by the time this drops, we may be at 20,000.
Yeah,
maybe we're going to get an ECMA for spoken word.
We might. And if we look a little bit further into the mailbox, we have just a lot of spam.
Okay.
We've in our socials folder, we have a lot of new followers on LinkedIn.
Great.
Brunswick Archaeology Podcast does maintain a LinkedIn profile. And we want to actually maybe do a shout out we will in our holiday episode, but also to all the people who are engaging with the shorts that we've been posting to YouTube. It may be getting cold outside, but the shorts are getting hot. So we do appreciate that.
And there's the explicit
and
rating.
then we've got I think that's about it.
Okay,
we've got a lot of spare space. Yeah.
Terrific. And if the listener would like to write in, where would they write in?
They would be sending that to newbrunswickarchaeology@gmail.com. That is New Brunswick Archaeology, all one word, archaeology spelled ARCHAEOLOGY, newbrunswickarchaeology@gmail.com. You can find us on Instagram at @new_Brunswick_archaeology, and you can find us on LinkedIn. Just search in the function New Brunswick Archaeology Podcast, and you'll find us there. Send us a direct message on either Instagram or LinkedIn, and always happy to receive your emails, listeners.
That's right. And we have a very exciting show lined up here today. Like we said, we're going to be plugging Readers of the Lost Ark, Imagine the Ark of the Covenant from Ancient Times to the Present by Kevin McGeough. And we are doing this probably in time for the listener to order this for Christmas.
Yeah, it should be. And if it's not arrived by Christmas, I'm guessing that you're going to be able to leave an IOU or even a printed copy of There's a Book on the Way. And you can find, as we pitch, you can find it at Indigo if you're looking to support a Canadian company, and probably at your local bookstore in some cases.
I suspect that is true in some cases, and it's through Oxford University Press, if you want to order right from them, in order to get it in time for Epiphany.
Exactly. It'll pair well with that. Yeah.
Exactly. And then, Ken, after that, we're going to have a very special kind of hit piece.
That's right. Should we save that for hit pieces?
Oh, sure. Well, without further ado, then.
Without further ado, enjoy our conversation with Kevin, and we'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon, listener.
So today, joining us in the New Brunswick Archaeology Podcast Mercy Seat, we have Dr. Kevin McGeough, who is a professor of archaeology at University of Lethbridge and a Board of Governors Research Chair in Archaeological Theory and Reception. Kevin graduated from the University of Lethbridge in 1996 with a BA in History, great distinction. He graduated from Harvard Divinity School in 1998 with an MTS, and his PhD is from the Department of Near Eastern Languages and Civilizations at the University of Pennsylvania. He currently serves as the co-chair of the Department of Geography and Environment and is the incoming vice president of AZOR, or the American Society of Overseas Research. He's also the past editor of both of that organization's major journals and monograph series, Archaeological Reports Series and the Annual of AZOR. Kevin has published dozens of articles and several books, including a 3-volume series, The Ancient Near East in the 19th Century, and Representations of Antiquity in Film, from Griffith to Grindhouse. His research interests span continents from ancient Hebrew and text-based archaeologies to Iron Age tells in Jordan, to an ongoing project exploring the earliest occupations of Head Smashed and Buffalo Jump with our colleague Dr. Sean Bubel and Bob Daw of the Royal Alberta Museum. But for those of you who don't know Kevin, one of his passions is the intersection of archaeology, the public, film, and of course, Indiana Jones. And it's these interests that brought the publishers of Oxford University Press to Kevin to write a book about our topic today, The Ark of the Covenant. And Kevin's latest book, and you can see it on your screen here, is Readers of the Lost Ark, Imagining the Ark of the Covenant from Ancient Times to the Present. Thank you for coming on the podcast, Kevin.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's great to be here.
Thanks for joining us, Kevin. Before we get going, Ken mentioned that you worked at Head Smashed In, and so I want to know, how did they fit 2 bison in the Ark?
Well, by the time we get to them, they're all butchered up and so small, right? That is no problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's an M&I type situation. Exactly. I understand. Okay. Exactly. Yeah. But in all seriousness, Kevin, thank you very much for joining us. And maybe to start off, could you give us a little bit of background and just a bit about the setting of the Ark, of what it was and when it was likely made, and a little bit about what many know as biblical times?
Yeah, sure. So the Ark of the Covenant, I think my guess is that most of the listeners to this podcast are going to know the Ark of the Covenant from Indiana Jones, from Raiders of the Lost Ark, from the golden box that Indy searches for in that film, right? I'm guessing it's more of that kind of an archaeology crowd than the biblical archaeology crowd that's tuning in to your podcast. So the Ark of the Covenant, though, the thing that Indy's searching for, it is an object that is purported to be real by the Bible. Scholars debate whether or not there ever was an ark or not. But at least from the biblical story, this was a box that Moses was commanded to build while he was up on Mount Sinai getting the 10 Commandments. So he gets the 10 Commandments, and then he gets very, very specific very, very specific instructions on this particular box to make. And the description is very, very vivid. There's a few words we don't understand, but essentially we have the same sense of this golden box, or a box made of acacia wood with gold plating, with staves that come out to carry it, with things on top called cherubim, which we don't actually understand all that well. Probably in ancient times they were like sphinxes. Now we kind of think of them as angels because of the Indiana Jones film and because of Renaissance art. And so this was a box then that the 10 Commandments were stored in. And as the Israelites wandered in the wilderness, God's presence was somehow connected to this box. And here the Bible stories kind of vary. The box was really dangerous, so if you touched it, even if you're a good person, but you weren't ritually clean, you would die, right? So it would kill you. Sometimes God would seem to appear on top of the ark, so maybe it was thought of as like a kind of a throne for God, or like a thing to parade him around and carry him around while the Israelites were wandering in the wilderness. When they come and take the promised land, the ark seems to have kind of weapon-like qualities. So at one point it parts the Jordan River. It seems to be involved as Jericho gets destroyed. And causes all sorts of problems when the Philistines eventually capture it. It destroys all their things. They send it back to Israel, where it is eventually installed in Jerusalem, eventually into the Temple of Solomon. And there it becomes kind of a centerpiece of Israelite worship, sort of held in the back of the Temple of Solomon, in a place where only the most holy, called the Holy of Holies, where only really ritually clean priests could go and visit. And then it kind of vanishes from the story. And the Bible doesn't really say what happens to it. We know Solomon's temple was destroyed, but we don't really know what happened to the Ark. And there's this sort of ambiguity of why the biblical authors just lost interest in it and didn't care about it. There's a few hints here and there in other parts of the Bible later on about like where it could have gone and things like that. But it just seems to fall off. It's the central important artifact, and then of no interest to the writers. And so that's kind of the excitement of the Ark, I think, where it's set up. If that makes sense in terms of a setting for the story of the Ark for the New Brunswick listeners.
And we'll return to Ethiopia, but my recollection is that Indiana Jones just says it goes poof, right? Is that the phrase he uses?
Yeah. And then so in the Indiana Jones movies, the idea is that the pharaoh Shishak, and that's how the pharaoh is referred to in the Bible. Shoshonk's maybe a better Egyptological name for him, but the claim in that film is that Shoshank attacks Jerusalem, takes the Ark with him, and installs it back in Egypt in the lost city of Tanis, recognizing that it probably has some kind of weapon-like qualities there. But we do know that Shishak did attack what is now known as Israel around that time. He doesn't list Jerusalem as one of the cities that he attacked, but it's sort of a plausible kind of story in some ways. But there's no reason to connect Shishak with the Ark other than from Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Right.
Okay.
And there's not really, so there is a real Tanis and there is this real story, but there's no like Well of the Souls or anything like that.
No. I think, and I like the Well of the Souls. Like I love the Well of the Souls. I know the map room, right? But it makes no sense. Right?
Yeah.
This makes no sense in Egyptian culture, right? You're not going to have this gigantic map room, right? Where you lay out all the buildings and you put the staff over on exactly the right spot at exactly the right moment. And then the sun shines through and shows you where the Ark is hidden. But they don't have that in Egypt. That is from Battlestar Galactica. Like they totally ripped that off of Battlestar Galactica. There's a Battlestar episode, and Dijkstra, who is the special effects guy that used to work for Lucas, he was part of the production of that movie or that TV series, and they just glaringly ripped it off.
That's great.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you've already used the phrase that. So as I indicated to you before we were online, I've somewhat crammed your book. I read it in a couple of days. But I texted Ken the other day. I said this book could be called Scholars Debate because you use that line frequently to sort of, and you've already used it here. And I think it should be the next Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones Scholars Debate. I think that would be. The ticket.
Yeah, you can imagine that archaeologists working in the Middle East are kind of used to debating. Lots of discussion in different ways, right? So it's for the default for the discipline.
Yes.
And so we're talking about you kind of gave us the background of what the Ark was, and we're in Moses times, and so we're talking about a period about 3,000 years ago or so. Is that we're kind of in that time frame?
Yeah, that's
And so this is a time period that the listeners will recognize as the Early Woodland, whereas in the Levant,
Hebrew can, so they really get the message.
but in the Levant, you're talking about the Iron Age, and so can you kind of give us a broad outline of sort of what's happening, like outside of the biblical world, or how the biblical stories tie into kind of broader Bronze and Iron Age culture and interactions? Sort of like how are these two things linked, and how does the Ark fit into this broader picture of what's happening in the Levant around that time?
Yeah. So it's a good question. I would say that this is probably the only setting where Early Woodland is more recognizable than Iron Age, I think. So I love that. So if, in the Levant and the Eastern Mediterranean in general, the late Bronze Age is this period of, like, for lack of a better word, internationalism. I don't like the nation terminology there, but just the idea of all these different regions that are interconnected in different ways. And they're really, really closely connected. And at the end of the late Bronze Age, all of those connections just die out. They just vanish. And we get this movement towards really, really insular kind of identity formation coming into being, sort of creating, and this sort of retraction into kind of a rural life away from heavily urbanized, maritime-oriented cultures. And so it's within that kind of context that the biblical story of the Ark kind of emerges. It's because it's right before the Ark comes into Israelite history, right before the formation of the state of Israel, right before the kingdom of Israel comes into being. And so it sort of reflects this tradition, this period of time where there is no, like, where the larger polities are not as clear cut in a way. And then as the Ark gets incorporated into the religion of Israel, it's as Israel gains a monarchy, becomes a monarchic state, and we get the emergence of Israel. Israel's a kingdom. Now, that's sort of the biblical take on it in terms of how the Bible intersects with all this. And we don't actually know about these early stages. The archaeology and the biblical text in terms of this early Iron Age don't line up very, very well. Again, scholars debate what happens with the origins of the kingdom of Israel. But there's clearly these traditions going around that are trying to sort out where these national identities come from and why we should be thinking of ourselves oriented towards this kingdom. And in particular, Israel in the Bible is really interesting because there are all these national deities that start emerging at this time. So you start to have a god that comes to be identified with a state in a way that hadn't been before. And then along with that, with Israel, is this interesting emergence of monotheism. And the Ark seems to be tied into this emergence of the belief that there is, first off, that there's just one god that's way better than the other gods. And then eventually, by the end of the Iron Age, we're probably looking at a culture that's fully monotheistic, and they no longer believe any of the other gods actually existed. And so that's a really interesting sort of intellectual tradition that's emerging alongside of the emergence of these different kingdoms in the Iron Age Levant at this time. And so that's kind of where the Ark fits in. So if you're taking a sort of more of an archaeological view of what the Ark is, it's part of the story trying to justify or understand the emergence of the kingdom of Israel at a later time. People writing about this and thinking about it in those terms.
Gabe, that sounds an awful lot like increasing sociopolitical complexity. Wouldn't you say that?
I would say that's our theme this season, Kevin.
Yeah.
Were you on the northwest coast of Israel?
Put a big check mark on my page here now that we've got that. That we got that.
Right, this is a Gary's podcast, right? And so that was.
Yeah. Don't worry, we'll remember you when we win a second public communication award, Kevin. But I'm going to skip ahead here a little bit, actually, because what you said, I think, actually raises some really relevant points for a question we have later down the list here. But so in the book, you talk about biblical archaeology kind of as a discipline, and you talk about some of these difficulties. Like you just mentioned that the Bible and the archaeology are sometimes difficult to reconcile. And you also mentioned throughout the book that serious biblical archaeologists aren't out like hunting for the Ark. You know, this is not what's supposed to be done. Could you just tell us sort of like why they aren't out hunting for the Ark and what it is that biblical archaeologists actually do?
Yeah. I think it's a really good question because I think biblical, out of all the archaeological disciplines, I think biblical archaeology is probably the most misunderstood, right? And there have been movements in the field to try to change the name. So for a while in the 80s, people tried calling it Syro-Palestinian archaeology. So Ken, that's why we have one of our classes at the U of L has the name Syro-Palestinian archaeology is because of that movement, right?
Well, Kevin, I couldn't help but notice that you're the vice president of ASOR, which stood for something different the last time I saw.
That's right. Yeah, you see the American Schools of Oriental Research, right?
Yeah.
Right. So there's all these sort of constant name changes. So I think in the 19th century, when people start engaging in archaeology in the Bible lands, they're really thinking that they will go out and test the Bible. But they're not really thinking that they're going to test it and it's going to come out falsely. They're going to find like positive material empirical evidence for biblical things happening. And so that's certainly the roots of the discipline is that kind of sensibility. But really by the 1960s, biblical archaeology has changed into a field that exists side by side with biblical studies, but in a different way. And so the kinds of questions that biblical archaeologists have been asking since the 1960s are really the same as the kinds of questions people will be asking in any archaeological region where you have at least a lot of material culture, right? So where you have urban life, urban issues, states, things like that. And so there are those kinds of questions. So Syro-Palestinian archaeology really has gone in that direction, and it's a little bit different than Egyptology, which still until very recently retained its art historical or philological roots. Like really, that was kind of the key thing, is to find good art or find texts in Egyptology, and biblical archaeology didn't have that. There was this really concerted effort to embrace different kinds of archaeological theory and methods. But beside that, is you always have the Bible. And then you have to deal with how people are working with the Bible. So on the one hand, the Bible has itself been the subject of scholarship for 2,000 years, right? So there is a robust body of thinking about the Bible, and a lot of disagreement about appropriate approaches to the Bible. So you have a whole group of scholars just working on the Bible itself, and then you have biblical archaeologists that intersect with that or try to avoid it or ignore it in some way or the other. So you have archaeologists like myself who are secular, interested in the Bible for historical reasons, but don't come into it from a faith perspective. And so for me, this isn't any kind of a challenge other than making sure when I'm talking to the public that I'm being sensitive to different faith communities and different perspectives in that way. But scholars, friends of mine who are scholars who come from a faith perspective, some of them like doing the archaeology as opposed to biblical studies because it allows them to tackle questions that don't actually question the historicity of the Bible or the potential that the Bible is divinely inspired. So we have a lot of very religious scholars that work in Jordan because there you're excavating the remains of the bad guys in the Bible, where the Bible doesn't talk very much about them. So you can skirt all the faith-based issues, or you have to worry about your school that has a religious perspective taking away your tenure because you've suggested the Bible might not be true in some way or the other, so they can kind of avoid it by working in other areas.
So is there?
Can we ask you to rank for a minute just the different religions and their approach to biblical archaeology?
Yeah. Well, but on that, and so. Is there kind of a gold standard of the version of the Bible that you use? Like the listener won't know this, but you read and work with ancient Hebrew, and so are you drawing from a particular version of the Bible that or is there kind of a standard that people try to draw from? Presumably,
King James only, Ken, please.
Yeah,
I was teaching
not Gideon's. I'm assuming that.
I was teaching some King James English for translation in class the other day. I would say Lethbridge is the only school that we know of where the geography department teaches ancient Hebrew. General course requirements. In terms of
shalom, kiddos.
Yeah. Shalom, gang. I would say the suggestion I give to the students is to use a bunch of different translations, and that's where you'll see the differences and the complexities pop up. In terms of if they're using one just to help them learn Hebrew, I suggest the Revised Standard Version because those scholars try to translate it to be very, very literal to Hebrew. And I suggest that one over the New Revised Standard Version because that translation is very good, but it's been made more politically correct. So they've taken out they've made it more gender inclusive. And that's probably good for faith communities reading that or people reading as a book of literature. But when I try to learn Hebrew, which is a gendered language, that can be a bit more confusing for the students. So the Revised Standard Version is the one I suggest that they read and use in terms of capturing the Hebrew without very much theological speculation.
Yeah, and you can find that one in the bookstore being sold back right around this time of year. Would that be correct?
Yeah, I would imagine so, yeah. Yes. But the NRSV is much more common, right? So
yeah.
This is the time of year we don't use that edition, Ken.
And so on the language thing, our listeners know the Acadians, but you're more familiar with Acadians with two Ks, and this language is actually kind of includes some very important clues to the structural aspects of the Ark. And so I think you were talking about this at the start, that understanding how the Ark is actually made is a bit of a language translation issue. Is that right? Like what it should look like and what we picture it looking like because of the Indiana Jones Ark are two very different things.
Yeah. So especially with the Acadian, that comes into play with one of the pieces. So just for your viewers or your listeners, so when I first told my dad I was taking Acadian in grad school, he was really confused in terms of I thought you worked in the Middle East. But so Akkadian is one of the languages from Mesopotamia, modern day Iraq. And so it's a really widespread Semitic language. It's related to Hebrew, but isn't the same. And so one of the things that studying Akkadian has done is really impacted biblical studies, because there is so much written in Akkadian and so much that's preserved in Akkadian that suddenly we have all these texts and all of these words that are cognate words in the same language. And so one of them is cherubim, which are the things that are said to be on top of the ark. And so if you remember from the Indiana Jones film, or picture right closely, you can kind of see these winged angels kind of facing each other with their wings facing one another. And
so for those of you listening at home and not watching the YouTube, you're just gonna have to buy the book. We'll put it. We'll put the show notes in there. But
the next question after this description is how you get the licensing for that image. That's the.
Oh yeah. So anyways, from Akkadian, we know that cherubim are probably sphinxes, right? So they're more like lion or bulls with human heads and wings. So you might have, if you've paid attention to any of Mesopotamia, if you know your Iron Age Mesopotamian palace architecture.
Well, you've come to the right place, Kevin.
yeah.
These are the things that ISIS.
There is one listener right now that is just clicking their heels, and they're like, "I knew my day would come."
If I wait long enough, I'm going to get to the good stuff. They don't care about projectile points at all, right?
No.
Lithics.
They've got a typology of.
It's not pointy
Yeah,
rocks.
they've also got a typology of cherubim on their shelf right now that they're like, here we go.
Yeah, so then cherubim gets confused over time. So eventually it gets embraced by medieval angelology, where cherubim are seen as the angels that are really close to God, and it's partially because of Augustine reading about the ark being how God comes to earth and things like that. So we imagine the cherubim as being the angels that are really close. And then in the Renaissance, they start imagining them as puto, like little babies, and that's where you get the fat babies. And they're playing off of images from Roman sculpture, Greco-Roman, but mostly it's Roman copies of Greek or Roman ones, where there's Cupid or other little babies clinging to the statues, and that's how we get our cherubim being the fat babies that they are. But if you know you're Akkadian, you're more likely to think that they are sphinxes.
Okay.
Would you care to opine about Ozempic and the image of cherubim?
I know I shouldn't be fat shaming the little babies, should I?
Yeah. But one of the things, Kevin, here that you've got is about, we've talked about the Ark, and then what happens to it. So we should maybe return to that a little bit, just talk specifically about the Ark. It kind of disappears.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just. And it's not like narratively in the Bible it says like, and then the ark went away and we don't know what happened to it. It's just like they stopped talking about it. They just kind of lose interest. And then we have a few hints in, kind of like allusions to it in some of the literature. And then in the apocryphal literature, so this is literature that Protestants don't see as canonical, but Catholics do. But it's written much later. Then there's some speculations about where it might come. And then in the New Testament, it seems to be tied in with some apocalyptic imagery, and that it's going to be part of when Jesus returns, the ark will be there as well. But it seems to be missing. And so, but it's just forgotten about in the Bible. Now, part of it might be because the Bible is this curated document. And what that means is that it's a whole bunch of different stories and accounts and pieces of literature, historical accounts, legal materials that were then all combined later on by editors and then put together. So they just worked with what they had, and so there were no traditions by that point of what happens to the ark, so they don't make it into the Bible. But narratively, it feels really weird that it just suddenly is, not part of the story anymore. And just,
how do we know it's in Ethiopia then?
Yeah, I know the Ethiopian. So there's a lot of people that will believe that it's in Ethiopia. And I think there's two sets of groups that'll think it's in Ethiopia. So there's the Graham Hancock crowd that will have read his first book, the book that set him on the path of superstardom and pseudo-archaeology, where he basically describes Ethiopian accounts of how it got to be in the Bible. So there'll be that crowd. But then there'll also be Ethiopian Christians and Rastafarians who it's really a significant part of their religious tradition that the Ark resides in Ethiopia. And so the story that the Ethiopian church has about this is that so there's a story in the Bible of the Queen of Sheba who comes to visit King Solomon, And in the Ethiopian version of that story, the Queen of Sheba is the Queen of Ethiopia, and she goes and her and Solomon have an affair. She becomes pregnant, goes back to Ethiopia, and when her son Menelik is old enough, he returns to Israel to meet his father. Solomon greets him, recognizes that he's his son, and recognizes that he's the firstborn son. And because he's the firstborn son, all of the covenants that have been made with God pass on to Menelik, not to Solomon's other children. And so Menelik gets the Ark, and there's different accounts of how the Ark gets back to Ethiopia. Sometimes it sort of magically gets there, other times his friends steal it. But either way, it comes back to Ethiopia with him and gets installed in a church in Axum, where it is still thought to be to this day, right? And so there is a church in Axum where it is held. There will be one priest who gets chosen to be the priest who's in charge of the Ark, and it's their job for the rest of their life to be watching the Ark and being the only one that can come into its presence. So of course that's perfect for like the pseudo-archaeology kind of thing, where it's like, well, it's here, but we can't let you look at it, but trust us, and here are all these other texts that describe how it got here. But it's a really, really important part of Ethiopian religion. Like, you won't find Ethiopian Christians that don't believe the Ark. The Ethiopian Christians will not believe the Ark is somewhere else. And
even like Haile Selassie, right, was like supposed to be descendant from these guys you talk about in the book.
That's right. And so all of the there's a long Ethiopian dynastic tradition of claiming a connection to Solomon, right? And which kind of makes sense when you're trying to justify your authority as a dynastic leader, to try to tie yourself into some mythical famous leader. And so that ended in the 70s when Haile Selassie was deposed, right? But that was part of the Ethiopian constitution, was that it was a Solomonic line.
Yeah. Cool.
You had a line in when you're talking about some of the pseudo-archaeology stuff that I'm sure Gabe picked up on. A friend of ours, Daryl, did an episode with us a couple of years ago about pseudo-archaeology, and could it be in Ethiopia? That is the kind of the piece that they lean into when they're that pseudo-archaeology is kind of leaning into, and it's trying to talk about the Ark in these ways. And so I think that I've lost my notes here, Gabe. So
well, what I was actually thinking, Ken, that so this would be a great point to talk about reception theory, which is Kevin's saying, right? Because that is a big part of how it's sort of like that this can be so important to Ethiopians while also being sort of obscure.
Yeah, and that's really one of my major research areas, is reception of archaeology. And so for the listeners or the viewers who haven't heard about reception theory, reception traditions, this kind of comes out of classical and biblical studies, where you're looking not at trying to look at the text to prove that they're right or wrong, or to find out historical things about the time that they're talking about. You're trying to look at how other communities have made sense out of these things and what kind of art it's inspired. So you could imagine, instead of, if you are doing reception history of the Bible, you might be looking at Renaissance painting, and you're not trying to argue about whether that painting is accurate to the Bible. You're looking at that painting as a piece of art and an interesting expression about the Bible. And so I've been trying to apply that to archaeology in general, and in different settings, not just biblical archaeology, but all sorts of settings, about how different communities make meaning out of archaeology, and how archaeological things come to be important to different communities, how it can be good, how it can be bad, what we have to be concerned about as archaeologists in terms of participating in this. And so the book that I've written about the Ark is really not about the Iron Age Ark so much as about how different communities have understood and reimagined the Ark over the past 2,000 years, and how it works to inspire different kinds of imagination, and why people are imagining it in certain ways and other ways, and how they use it, and how and there's always with this a kind of a question that I think we as archaeologists should be having is, okay, well, like, why is the public interested in this, and what are our ethical obligations to the public in relation to this, right? Because we're publicly funded, right? So we get our money from universities, from governments, because people are interested in this. But then what is it?
Well, Kevin, let's see how your collective bargaining goes.
Yeah, I know exactly. We'll see.
But for now, sure, yeah.
Yeah, so it's sort of that's kind of the big thing that I'm interested in outside of my actual digging life.
So, cool. and does this tie in the Ark being kind of a way to approach this idea of reception theory? Is it this you position the Ark as a meta symbol in the book, and so is that part of its power of thinking, being a really good sort of heuristic for thinking about reception theory is that it's this idea that it is a meta symbol. So can you talk about, first of all, what is a meta symbol and why the Ark fits as this and kind of like represents a whole bunch of different things to different people?
Yeah. So a meta symbol is this kind of is a symbol that is really sort of convincing in a way, but people can fill in whatever they want to fill into it in terms of meaning. So here I'm inspired by the work by a guy named Malcolm Quinn, who wrote a book called The Swastika. Great book. And he talks about how the swastika was just an incredibly powerful propagandistic tool because this was something that looked really ancient, like the swastika symbol looked really ancient. You could point to it in lots of places. You could point to it in lots of places where he claimed Indo-Aryans had lived at some point, right? And so it seemed to have really, really strong ties to the ancient world and was visibly recognizable. Like visually, you can immediately tell what it is. But it has absolutely no meaning in the ancient world, and so there is no baggage with it. It's just like filler for like artistic designs and things like that. So they could fill it with all the horrors of Nazi ideology, and they could come and encompass that. And so this is the same kind of process that I think is going on with the Ark, where it's this object that's described in incredibly vivid detail, and we all kind of agree on what the Ark looks like, and we all kind of have a sense of what the Ark of the Covenant is, and that's made especially easier because of Indiana Jones, but we all have this idea of what it looks like. But what exactly it was, even the biblical authors don't agree on it. Like some say it's like a throne, some say it's a weapon, some say it's like a place for the Ten Commandments to have been held. There's also different ways you can imagine what it could do and what it did and what it symbolizes. The New Testament it creates there's a lot of metaphorical uses. So the like Mary's womb is understood to be the new Ark of the Covenant because like the Ark has
a very Dan Brownian
exactly.
thing.
Yeah.
Right? There's all these kinds of things, and so that's what gives it this power to be reimagined and reinterpreted over time.
And it's so powerful, in fact, that I believe it was interfering with your microphone earlier. That all the little arcs that were behind
That's right.
you.
The arcs behind me over here. They're all.
Well, so I was going to actually ask Kevin. So you acquired a replica Ark in the book. You go to a shop in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And what's in your Ark now?
Yeah, it's hilarious.
If it's drugs, we'll cut this out. Don't worry.
I open it up and our faces all melt.
Yeah.
That's the end of the New Brunswick Archaeology podcast.
Yeah.
Nova Scotia one rises up and takes over instead. In absence.
No, don't worry. There's no chance of that, Kevin.
No chance. The Oak Islands. Yeah, so my daughter saw all these arcs and she's like, "Father, these need to have ghosts." And so she made and put little paper ghosts and put them all. All my arcs are all filled with little paper ghosts she made a few years ago.
Excellent. Good.
Yeah.
So I think probably the rest of you read books this way too, but there are certain like vignettes that really stick out to you when you read a book. And I was struck by the Parker expedition. In part because I've also been on an archaeology project that had 2 mystics and it didn't go well. But it struck me as really a pretty astonishing saga. And can you just sort of talk a little bit about the Parker expedition and some of the ethical concerns that Ark hunting has engendered more broadly?
Yeah. So the Parker expedition, I think this is one of the more wilder stories in my book, and there's lots of other good accounts of the Parker expedition, right? Because people in my field find it's just so bizarre that it happened. But there is
it sounded like a lot of fun, I have to say, until it didn't.
until it went really bad.
Yeah.
So there's this Finnish mystic who got his PhD.
Finally, a phrase we've never heard on the podcast before. A Finnish mystic.
Finnish mystic. Maybe a through line for next season, right?
That might be the title. So there's this Finnish mystic.
So
the unfinished mystic is the one you have to worry about. The finished mystic is fine.
Yeah, so he got his PhD looking for secret codes in the Bible. He became convinced that he knew where the Ark was, and he happened upon some wealthy British former military guys, probably having PTSD from the Boer War, but that wouldn't have been recognized at the time. But they were kind of like guys that couldn't be in the military anymore, but they didn't have anything else that they could do. So they raised some money to go have an Ark expedition in Jerusalem. And the idea, they raised money because they thought, well, if we find the Ark, it's going to be worth so much money. This is a really good investment. And this guy, Juvelius, knows exactly where it is. So they raise this money, and so Parker is the name of the main guy who organized it. They go to Jerusalem, and they buy up some land, and they pretend that they're just sort of working on building like charitable kinds of things in Jerusalem, but really they're digging around looking for stuff. And people start to get wind of this, and they get worried, like, you can't just come to Jerusalem and start wrecking heritage. Like, you guys don't know how to do archaeology. Then they get another...
What do you think this is, New Brunswick?
So they get another mystic involved, and him and Juvelius fight, and Juvelius probably engages in some sexual assault, gets kicked out of Palestine, which was called at the time, gets sent away, and they just keep digging and don't find anything, lose their money, come back another year. They realize that where they're digging is probably not going to work out, so they convince one of the guards who is in charge of the Dome of the Rock, which is the third most holy site in Islam, convinces him that the Ark is probably buried underneath the Dome of the Rock, and that kind of makes historical sense, that the Dome of the Rock is built on top of the Second Jerusalem Temple, right? It's the center of Jerusalem, right? It would make sense that there's a long tradition. The Western Wall is there. We know that there was earlier Jewish monuments beneath the Dome of the Rock. So it's kind of a logical place where the Ark might be. So they go into the Dome of the Rock at night and go into areas where they're not supposed to be, and then they get busted for digging in this holy site. And so then a riot breaks out in Jerusalem because it becomes apparent that these British guys are digging for Jewish artifacts in the Dome of the Rock, right? And this leads to a riot in Jerusalem, and these guys flee, make it out of Jerusalem. They end up not getting killed, but they're probably lucky to have gotten out of there alive. And so it's one of the real problems with this kind of thing, with this kind of Ark hunting, is where people imagine the Ark is. They imagine it in places that are in politically volatile locations. So Jerusalem is one of the most politically volatile locations in the world, and the Temple Mount, the Haram Sharif, where the Dome of the Rock is, where the Western Wall is, this is one of the most religiously contested sites in the world, right? This is the center of Jewish and Islamic religion, so really, really, really volatile. And so just messing around with that and stoking concerns about how you can use archaeology to make land claims, all sorts of problems. There's another one of these stories about this in my book about these British Israelists who believe that the British were the descendants, one of the lost tribes of Israel, and in the turn of the 20th century, they go to Tara, which is arising as an Irish national site, and they go digging for the Ark there, and they start destroying one of the most important Irish sites, looking for the Ark. And again, it's politically volatile, right? This is the beginning of Irish nationalism, and all sorts of chaos ensues, right? So it's a really problematic kind of thing, but it's often where pseudo-archaeology leads people.
Yeah, I thought that was all a super interesting part of the book, actually, and I think sort of the power of the Ark in a kind of strange way. Like, it's interesting what people latch onto.
Yeah. And this is kind of what I was saying. Is like it seems to motivate people in a really, the allure or the draw of it is very, like, what you see in Indiana Jones is kind of what draws people to the Ark, is this kind of unknown power, right? And so along with that, it's also you've talked about millenarian movements that have kind of grabbed on to the Ark, and you mentioned it earlier that there's this kind of fascination with understanding where it is also has implications for the end of the world, and so can you talk a little bit about, like,
Emanuel,
how
if you could insert a lightning bolt when he says end of the world, that'd be great.
Exactly. So how are people kind of engaging with the Ark today? Like, there's some interesting stories in the book about people building Arks and bringing God to Toronto and
well, it needs it, Ken, frankly, in my experience.
The Ark is down at the convention center, and its powers are maybe interfering with the Leafs or something. I don't know. But so how are people engaging with the Ark today?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a whole bunch of different ways. So, I think like the Ark in Toronto was a faith healing. It's a Brazilian church that is a faith healing thing where they bring out the Ark, and in the Bible you're not supposed to touch the Ark, but in faith healing crowds you touch these things and you get miraculously cured. So there's a great big massive event in Toronto, and they have these all over the world where where people go and see the Ark, and its miraculous power, heals them of all of their issues. And so, it's kind of common in a very distinct late 20th century, early 21st century Protestantism and evangelicalism where that happens. That there's lots of arks that are made in like Bible wax museums. Like I love Bible wax museums; it's one of my favorite kinds of things to go. Like I love them, right? So,
I wonder if there's any in the Rossignol Cultural Center. Did you have?
Yeah.
Yeah, so people will make them in those kinds of places, and they're kind of testaments to faith. So there's something kind of appealing to people about seeing, well, I read about this in the Bible, and here is a tangible, physical representation of the Ark, and it makes you feel like your faith has been affirmed because you've come into contact or you've seen visually what your faith could be or what it could experience. And then you have the millenarians we were talking about. These are one of the more concerning issues. And so there's a lot of millenarian movements that have basically this idea that to get Jesus to come back, or to get the Messiah to come, if it's for the first time, if you're one of the sort of Jewish kind of apocalyptic groups, you kind of need World War III to happen. That's sort of been part of the culture that's emerged. And you need to have...
Well, do you have a better idea, Kevin?
Yeah, exactly. I think we should worry about that stuff. I think they just leave things alone. So yeah, they want to conquer. They believe there needs to be another Jewish temple, a third Jewish temple built on the Dome of the Rock, which doing that would, of course, cause World War III, but they don't have any concerns about doing this. They don't have any concerns about causing military strife, because it kind of needs to happen for Messiah to return. And so the Ark gets invoked as a symbol to get people to pay money for this. There's one particular movement. I don't want to give them any press here, so I won't say their name on YouTube or on a podcast.
It's okay. We've already said Graham Hancock and
all the problematic
and
ones.
We've said so the SEO. Yeah, we just need to mention Taylor Swift a couple times, and the SEO will be just like cruising.
Well, it's fine. We're actually recording this from Ethiopia, so we're about to have the fully nuclear power of the Ark of the Covenant fueling us.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, but so Kevin, I guess on that note, and maybe actually it's a surprisingly good segue to this question that I had just tacked on into the list here because I thought it was interesting. But you talk about fake syllogisms.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of returns, and I gather you've also written a paper about this. Fake syllogisms in Jesus movies.
Yeah.
Do you want to explore this topic a little bit?
Yeah. So this was inspired by me reading some writings by Paul Schrader, who had been like a film critic, film scholar, until he realized he could make a lot more money writing scripts and directing. So you probably know the name more from he's the writer of Taxi Driver, right?
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. So anyway,
like the Scorsese movie?
Yeah. So,
oh, no kidding.
Yeah. So really like understands film at a very deep and profound level. Like he's one of my favorite filmmakers.
Yeah.
And so he talks about false syllogisms, and what he means by that is this idea that he thinks film constructs in people that, and he's usually when he talks about Cecil B. DeMille and the Ten Commandments as kind of the example. So if you see
many of which are violated in Taxi Driver by limited.
But if you see Moses part the Red Sea on screen, then because it happened on screen, it suggests to you then that it could have happened in real life. And so he calls this a false syllogism, this false logic you get from seeing something visually, and because film is so convincing, and you kind of forget what you've seen and where you've seen it, but you kind of absorb that because this could happen physically somewhere, that could have been real. And so you, watching a film like Ten Commandments, will reaffirm your faith in the historicity of the miracles of the Bible. And so he talks about this as a general warning about film, about how film has this power to create these false impressions that people have, and they can't keep track of it. But it's overwhelmingly powerful. And so that's kind of the false syllogism I'm talking about in this context.
And so that's kind of the idea that like we all picture the Ark as how we see it in how we've all seen it in Indiana Jones, right? Is that kind of the same idea that, you know, there's a biblical, you've talked about it a couple times. There's actually you detail in the book, there's really detailed instructions on what this is made out of and how it should look and everything. But we all picture it coming out of, you know, this stone pit in the Well of Souls, and we have this idea of what it looks like, and if you just zoom closely enough, you'll see that is it R2D2 and C3PO that are engraved in the side of it? Like, so yeah, there's false syllogisms and anachronisms and all sorts of other things, right? So
yeah. Well, but it's more than that, because I think the default then is sort of like you are imagining it as you've seen in Raiders of the Lost Ark. And it's really hard to imagine the Ark not as you've seen it in Raiders of the Lost Ark. But you have to actively work to not think of it that way. But then beyond that, you have kind of a default sense like this probably was a real thing, which in terms of biblical scholarship is not, that would not be the default take that biblical scholars would have on the Ark. Like faith-based scholars are going to take it as being a real thing, but historical critical scholars are going to be questioning all the stories about that early period we call the United Monarchy, the early first stages of Israel. But as a general public, you're going to just think, well, I've seen the Ark before, I can imagine this is a real thing. You probably won't believe that there's miracles with it, but you'll think this was some physical object that existed, that it was an historical thing that somebody could actually find if they went looking for it in theory, right? And you'll kind of not question it. And so in that way, the Ark, you know, I don't think there's much damage that comes from people thinking that way, but there's this larger issue then about being able to think critically about the media and how media representations are so powerful that we internalize these messages without even thinking about them anymore, without even being able to question them.
And you talk at length in the book about how the Ark has potentially been tangled up in like anti-Semitism and these kinds of things. Did you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, well, so one of the sort of issues that I talk about a little bit in the book is, you know, the easiest way to describe it is from the old German name for this thing, Bibel und Babel. They talk about it, and so it's this kind of sense about the ancient world that the Nazis really embraced, but it's sort of early German scholarship. When they started to excavate in Mesopotamia, they find all these tablets. Mesopotamian accounts seem to reflect a lot of Old Testament thinking, but with anti-Semitism, what that Mesopotamian stories could suggest is that there is a non-Jewish version of the Old Testament where you could still be a Christian, but you could be virulently anti-Semitic and still not see those things as being like asynchronous, right? That they could go together. And so imagining sort of alternative ways of getting the Judaism out of Christianity, it becomes a kind of powerful force in anti-Semitism, right? It becomes one of the kind of powerful tropes that gets used. And you mix that with some of the New Testament issues where, you know, it's you know, if I think the early church really is reflecting some inter-Jewish rivalry, right? But then it doesn't always play out that way to later readers who will read the book of Luke and see things, could imagine it being very anti-Semitic in places. It probably shouldn't be read that if you're reading it historically critically, but it's easy to drag those messages out. And you can mix that in with imagining a Mesopotamian Old Testament as opposed to a Jewish one. Or you get this also with things like the idea of like pagan traditions that are the origins of Christmas and things like that, because it's like, oh, let's take the Judaism out of Christianity, let's take the Judaism out of Christmas or Easter or things like that, right?
And you riff on Egypt too, right? Like Egypt is one of the ways they were trying to get around this, right?
That's another way too, right? It's another sort of powerful culture that has these connections, right? That you can lay claim to and sidestep the Jewish origins of Christianity if you want to.
It's why I have an inflatable Steve Martin on my lawn doing the King Tut right now, just to celebrate the season.
Yeah. So
I would love to get one of those.
So Kevin, we're cognizant of the time, and for Gabe, it's quite long in the night there, but so you've talked about your book and your research at Cambridge. You've been on CBC, and now you're on the New Brunswick Archaeology podcast. And so I think our listeners really want to know, Kevin, where is the Ark?
Well, I can't tell you. But if you buy my next book, I will have the answers there.
Yeah, well, it's available in in fine bookstores, I think. I don't actually. It's so Kevin, do the pitch here. I'm buying the book. Describe it and where it can be purchased.
Right. So it's a good question. So you can get it from Oxford, Oxford Press, and I think
it is on both Indigo and Amazon.
Right.
Okay, great.
And I think it runs for about $40 Canadian. Maybe less on Amazon, depending. But I also would encourage you to ask your local independent bookseller to bring it in for you. Makes for a perfect Christmas present.
And so I can say I think the intended audience would be kind of almost anyone who's kind of interested in this sort of thing. I think, and also I thought the chapters could have been read independently if you were interested in some parts more than others. But who did you kind in the audience?
Yeah, that's how they sort of want you to write books now, because that's how they make the money now that people don't buy actual books. Is they hope to sell off separate chapters by themselves, right? So there's kind of a.
Is that why they have the whole citation at the beginning of each chapter?
I noticed
on
that.
the bottom of the page.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's the new world we're moving into in terms of book publishing, right?
Terrific. Okay.
But it is designed for non-specialists, so I don't have footnotes, which was kind of weird.
Yep.
I used to do popular writing, and I hadn't done it for a while. But it's really meant to be a book that you don't have to have any background in this to understand. And
for the academic audience, there's a bibliographic essay at the back that if you really want to kind of do a deep dive in sort of each of these different vignettes and stories that kind of appear in each of the chapters, there's a whole list of scholarship that you can draw on. So it fits many parties.
And I do think it would actually make quite a good Christmas present.
Yeah. And before we sign off, though, the licensing. How did you get the picture?
So
if you're allowed to tell us.
No, I can tell you. So the cover one they paid for.
Scholars differ on how he got the picture.
Yeah, I think the cover one cost only about $200, right? But Lucasfilm just as a general for academic uses.
Well, it's a good thing we're moving this. He's $180 in the hole right now in an academic volume.
Exactly. I had to negotiate it for the contract. Because normally publishers pay for the cover, and then you pay for things that are inside.
Yeah.
So then, how I got the other things is if you own the object, that counts as fair use. So instead of showing reproducing the poster from Indiana Jones, I have a photo of the VHS that I've owned for many years. And so
excellent.
There's ways to.
Wait, so why is there a picture of the Ark, but you don't say where the picture was taken? Would you like to explain that? It's in Lethbridge, Alberta.
Yeah, no.
Could it be in?
It's in this one lab we haven't taken the newbie Ken to yet.
Yeah. Well, I was just introduced. I don't know, Kevin. I was just introduced to a new lab only a couple weeks ago. So who knows how many other labs there are deep inside the E or F wing of the longest hallway in the world.
That's right. Once you get tenure, we're going to put you on robes, and we'll take you in for the ceremony.
I just want to point out, you guys have a serious option for collective bargaining here that I don't think you've explored.
We can try it out and see.
Kevin, before we let you go, even though it is late, how did you get into this? Like, what's your story?
Like, how did I get into the Ark of the Covenant stuff? I'd always been interested in Indiana Jones stuff, right? So that's sort of primordial for me, right? Is like I remember being really interested in Egypt, and then seeing an ad with Han Solo being an archaeologist and like demanding my parents take me to it. So I've always had that long-term interest. How I got into
writing. You said, "Mom, teach me Hebrew."
Yeah. But then how I got into the Ark of the Covenant is the thing. Like I basically got my friend at the University of Lethbridge, teaching the world studies, Jim Linville. He got an email from Oxford from an acquisitions editor who had done a PhD with the same advisor that Jim had, saying, "Do you want to write a book on the Ark of the Covenant?" And Jim's like, "No, I don't, but I know who would probably like to." And I got an email. I'm like, "Yeah, of course I want to write this book." So I sort of did this as a side hustle while I'm doing other things. So
it's a pretty impressive side hustle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Kevin, it's been an absolute. Sorry, Ken, did you have another question? Or
no, I was going to do the exact same thing. So,
Kevin, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think Ken's about to say, Kevin, it's been an absolute pleasure. So.
Yeah. It has been a pleasure. It's been great having you on, and looking forward to hearing. For those of you who don't know Kevin, if you get a chance to hear one of his talks, always entertaining, and stay tuned for, I guess, where the Ark is going to be in the. I don't know what's the next project is coming out in the next couple of years, but the answers will be revealed in due time, listener.
Right.
And with climate change, it's very important that you know where to go in a flood.
And so it is, once again, readers of the Lost Ark, Imagining the Ark of the Covenant from Ancient Times to the Present by Kevin McGeough, and it's from Oxford University Press. So thank you, Kevin. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks
Kevin.
Well, Ken, I think it's time for hit pieces. And we've got a very special hit piece lined up today.
Yes, so we're going to be turning things over to a pre-recorded segment I did a couple of weeks ago with Curtis Blakey, who is the Secretary of the Canadian Cultural Resources Association, to talk about a survey that they are doing and promo some of the activities that the CCRA has been up to since we went to the meeting back in March.
That's great. And so without further ado, I guess we'll hand it over to you, Ken, and to Curtis Blakey.
All right, listeners, we are now doing a live audio hit piece. And so we are actually joined today by Curtis Blakey, who is an archaeologist and lead at Blakey Archaeological Consulting. And he is joining us today also in his capacity as the Secretary for the Canadian Cultural Resources Association. Welcome to Hit Pieces and the New Brunswick Archaeology Podcast, Kurt. And can you first start by telling us what is the CCRA?
The CCRA is the first national organization representing the cultural resources management industry in Canada. So it's an organization of CRM firms and leaders who are dedicated to advancing the practice of CRM across the country.
That's fantastic. And the listener will remember that we did a special episode from the CCRA's first conference back in March of 2025. But you guys are on here because you are doing a survey, and so we're going to do some promotion on that. And so what is the purpose of the survey and who's it aimed at?
So the survey is called Listening to the Provinces, a CCRA consultation on regional issues, and it's targeted broadly at everyone who's involved in cultural resources management in Canada, but we especially want to hear from leaders and owners of CRM firms across the country. And the objective here is to really try to draw out what are the challenges that are being faced in different provinces so that we can have a good handle on both the specific issues in different regions and jurisdictions, as well as some of the common issues that we see across the country.
Yeah. So, and you guys are kind of involved in several different initiatives right now, not so much at the provincial level, but trying to think more broadly at a national level about the concerns that CRM practitioners are having across the country. And so this can kind of feed into objectives in the next coming year or so, right?
Yes. So one of the big issues that we're seeing right now are some of the legislations that are being put forward to fast track major projects. And we want to ensure that cultural resources and heritage are still protected appropriately with those major projects. But then there's also just the ongoing challenges that have been present in the CRM sector across the country for as long as I've been around. Things like capacity, regulatory clarity, those sorts of issues.
Excellent. And so where would the listener find this survey?
Probably the easiest and best way to find it is if you can find the Canadian Cultural Resources Association, the CCRA, on LinkedIn or Facebook and look for our most recent posts. We've been sharing the survey there. That's probably the best way to find it.
And the listener would find them at facebook.com/p/Canadian-cultural-resources-association. But I think if you just type Canadian Cultural Resources Association into Google, the Facebook and the LinkedIn pages come up. And so you guys have a website, you've got Facebook, you've got LinkedIn. You also have the upcoming second annual CCRA conference. And so where is that going to be and when is it?
So we're currently planning that conference for March 13th in Quebec City, Quebec. And
Excellent.
We're really looking forward to it. We're working on the speaker series, other events around it. It should be a good way to bring everyone together and start talking about these national issues.
All right. And we'll also highlight, too, if you are interested in the CCRA, you can reach out through their social media, but they also now have a registration portal open where you can yourself or your company can become members of the CCRA. And so thanks, Kurt, for coming on today. And we'll continue to kind of share this. And anything else you want to promo before we sign off?
No, that's great. I think it's been a long time coming to have a national voice for CRM firms and practitioners in the country, and things are really coming together, and we're seeing a lot of common ground and a lot of places that we can learn from each other.
Excellent. All right, so that was a good little chat with Curtis. And so our only other hit piece tonight is, once again, the book is Readers of the Lost Ark by Kevin McGeough. It is from Oxford University Press. Readers of the Lost Ark, Imagining the Ark of the Covenant from Ancient Times to the Present. It's available today from your favorite bookseller, Indigo, from the Oxford University Press website, and always support local. So go check your independent bookstore locally or see if they can order it in for you. Great read, and you've got this podcast to pair with it if you're looking for a deeper dive.
That's right. And listener, we are looking forward to continuing this on in the new year, and I talk to you soon.
Yeah, so this will be our last regular episode for the year.
That's right.
And we've got our holiday episode coming up in the next few days, so stay tuned. Sometime shortly, sometime between Christmas and New Year's, we'll be dropping our holiday episode. It'll be featuring Gabe and I. It was actually recorded in person last week today
in Fredericton.
In Fredericton. And I do believe we are also going to hear from producers Emanuel and Cody. So it should be a fun episode. Always great to kind of recap the year. And we're looking forward to, we've got lots of programming planned for 2026.
That's right. We'll talk to you soon, listener.
Talk to you soon, listener, and speak to you in the new year.
That's right.
The New Brunswick Archaeology Podcast is brought to you every fortnight by the Association of Professional Archaeologists of New Brunswick. Funding and support is provided by Social Sciences Humanities Research Council grant, University of New Brunswick and University of Lethbridge. Research by Gabe Reinick and Ken Yoke. Production is handled by audio engineer Emanuel Akel. Video production by Cody Pye. Theme music is composed by Justin Hankey. Theme music remixed by Emanuel Akel. And Hakuna Rada by Shane Dell. Find us on Instagram at _New Brunswick _archaeology, on LinkedIn, and on the web at newbrunswickarchaeology.com.